You're listening to We Are the Great Turning, a podcast with me, Jess Sarante, and my friend and mentor, Joanna Macy, about living through these wild times with our hearts intact. This episode, episode 5, is the second in our two-part exploration of honoring our pain for the world. Last episode, I talked about a group ritual in the Work That Reconnects that we call the Truth Mandala. In the Truth Mandala, a group gathers to take turns speaking and hearing each other share our feelings of anger, grief, fear, and emptiness. And in episode 4, we got a masterclass in honoring anger from Joanna.
Oh, I wish I could have this anger be useful for something. Take it. Or I have a lot more to come. You want my anger? It's not going to stop.
Joanna's potent outrage is very relatable to me. I recognize myself in that fierce, protective passion for justice that she expressed. But in this episode, we're going to get into the sides of our pain that feel harder for me personally: numbness, grief, and desperation. We'll also be talking about suicide towards the end of the episode. So please make sure it's the right time and place for you to hear some strong expressions of hard feelings before you listen on. Before we dive in, let's resource ourselves for a moment with gratitude. Wherever you are, take a deep breath with me. Our planet has been holding you, nourishing you, and providing for you every moment of your entire existence. Can you feel her beneath you? Take a moment to call to mind something about being alive on Earth that you're grateful for. Maybe it's a person, an animal, or a place that you love. Or maybe it's an experience, like feeling your body in the sun or in the ocean. Whatever it is, simply allow yourself to feel your gratitude. Now, let's go to Joanna's table, where I was telling her one day about my fear of my own pain. There's an experience that I often have, that my grief and my rage at what has happened to our world is so deep and dark that if I were to touch the bottom of it, I might lose my mind.
Yes, I had that. I think many are afraid of that.
That I might actually break my brain if I let myself touch the depths of it, that if I could tap into the vein of grief that runs through our world, that my little body couldn't hold it. That's my fear.
Yeah. And I've heard it expressed back then when I was starting this work of saying, listen, if I were to let myself feel, let alone tell you what I feel about our world situation, if I were to let you know that, I wouldn't be able to hold my job. I wouldn't be able to support my family. I'd go bonkers.
These fears are common. Joanna always says that, yes, it takes courage, but she believes that we can face them. She draws on her decades of Buddhist practice for this.
This is where my Dharma practice really helped me, because these are just feelings, and that these are not some objective situation that's going to come as a, dark cloud. It's a painful feeling. And feelings just come and go.
Yeah.
And joy can come just like that.
Yeah.
And so can pain, and so can fear. You just pay great attention to what's coming up. And it's changing all the time. It's a flowing stream. And you're a flowing stream, but you just go, at this moment I'm feeling this, but that doesn't last long, and it changes. You just watch it.
This idea that our thoughts and feelings are a flowing stream is echoed by meditation and mindfulness teachers everywhere. And perhaps that's because, as profound and simple as it is, it's not always easy to live by. One day, in the middle of writing these very episodes, I was literally lying on the rug in my room crying. Bombs were falling on Gaza, and I had spent days in a fog of pain, trying to force myself to get my work done, and failing. I felt unmoored, and so I did something I rarely do. I called Joanna for help. Originally, I wasn't planning to record this conversation, but her response was so powerful that I put her on speakerphone and ran to my mic.
I'm wondering if in some way there could be the possibility of a voice in you that says, thank you, that you can feel that you're allowing yourself to feel this degree of horror and this human capacity is what has to happen for all of us. If we're going to grow up as a species, we have to feel the horror of which we're capable without an anesthetic. You can't wish it away, the pain. It's a pain that you have to bow to as a human being. That it is, you wouldn't want it not to be true for you. You wouldn't want you to find it tolerable.
No.
And that somehow you've got to allow it to hurt like hell without actually driving you crazy.
Yeah. I think that's the fine line for me. Like, because it feels maddening. It feels intolerable.
And in a way, it's sort of like a sacred pain. It is a good thing that we don't want it to be true.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it was a great thing you called me.
Yeah.
And maybe next time I'll be calling you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Joanna.
Thank you, Jess.
Love you. I'll see you in the morning.
Okay.
Okay.
Bless you.
Bye. For days after that phone call with Joanna, as I continued to struggle with my grief, I heard her like a refrain in my head.
And in a way, it's sort of like a sacred pain. You wouldn't want it not to be true for you. You wouldn't want you to find it tolerable.
In a strange way, this comforted me. To me, it meant this pain is not for nothing. We need it because we can use it to find the resolve to work for a better world. After this conversation, I had to just sit in the contradiction of it all. I'm learning how to let both things be true at the same time, how to stay with my pain and see the beauty in it, while also letting it go and not attaching. Joanna shows me how to do this. One day, I was visiting her while she was dealing with some minor health issues. She was recovering, but she was weary.
I simply want to stand like a horse in the pasture with the head away from the wind.
Yeah.
And let it blow and just subject myself to that. Feel the futility, feel the fatigue, feel the exhaustion.
Mm-hmm. And as she so often does, she turned from her own pain to her compassion and connection to the entire body of the earth.
Is this what the world feels too? Is this what the soil feels, exhausted by the fertilizers spread on it? Is this what the trees feel? Replanted where a forest once grew in all its diversity and interdependence, and now just stumps.
So we've now moved around the truth mandala, from rage to fear to grief, and even exhaustion. What we're going to talk about next, though, I do want to caveat. We'll be talking about suicide. So if that's not a good thing for you to listen to right now, please take good care of yourself and skip the rest of the episode. And if you're having thoughts of suicide or self-harm, call or text 988, the National Suicide Hotline. There will also be a list of resources that may help on the episode page at wearethegreatturning.com. One afternoon, Joanna and I were talking on Zoom about what more we could possibly do to wake people up to the climate crisis.
How can I use my being alive now to call attention to our collective suicide? We're acting as if we wanted to cash in our chips, aren't we? We're acting that way.
Something that I love about Joanna as a teacher is how she makes space for the thoughts that we rarely speak out loud and allows me to safely explore what's otherwise taboo. As we explored this feeling, we talked about people who choose suicide as a political act, a desperate attempt to call attention to a desperate situation. We wondered together, what does that do? What would it do if we were to make that choice? Would it really make a difference?
I don't want people to imagine that I would do that, but what else can we do to call attention to climate change?
I can't even talk about this theoretically without crying, but I feel like I'm like really putting myself in that scenario. It would, I don't know, it like disrupts something in my body, like this sense that, that death, that anyone's death, that the elimination of any life is the key to living.
Okay.
Which is what this is all about.
Right. It's so contradictory to the purpose. Because we're trying to, this is for life, for the sake of life, that we need to deal with the greenhouse gas emissions. We need to change what we're doing and what we're consuming. What you just said speaks immediately to me. But it's a point of my franticness about the need of what we have to do by 2030. And we're fiddling. We're doing nothing.
Desperation can take us to dark places. And with our politicians doing so little to meaningfully address the climate crisis, it makes sense that people are looking frantically for something that might make a difference. But where we ultimately landed was, this isn't it.
I will offer my greatest treasure by stopping it.
Yeah.
Or by offering it, but it's a dumb way to offer it by throwing it away. And for me then, to kill myself or threaten to kill myself, which is even meaner. I mean, what kind of a maternal figure is that? You don't do what I want, I'm going to kill myself. It's not fair.
As someone who's lost a dear friend to suicide, I never want to pass judgment on this choice. And yet, I want all of us to live.
I think this conversation, these words you were saying, are so important to capture, and for all the young people who are considering it, because I think there are, and that our conversation, that we can identify with the impulse to do that, that needs to be said if we're going to also say, we prefer you didn't choose it.
Yeah, if I was talking to a young person or a person, period, who was considering ending their life because of their ecological despair, I would want them to know that their despair, that they have every reason to have it, that I see it and that I feel it also, and that they are more than it.
You are more than your despair. I often resist my own despair. I don't like to feel it, so I look for ways to slip out of it. But something that helps me to be with what I'm feeling is to remember that in this world, it is sane to feel like this. These feelings don't mean that there's something wrong with us. In fact, they point to something very right. We feel these things because of our love and our connection to our world. And when we give ourselves room to feel them, that love and connection often amplifies in our lives.
In a way, doing the work that reconnects, we learn to trust life. We learn to trust each other. And this is a time on this planet when trust is rarer and more precious than gold. In the early days of starting this work, every single time I'd walk into a room where people were gathered expecting me to talk, I was afraid. I was expecting people to talk about what seemed to me no one knew how to talk about, which is your own failing spirits, your own fear, your own despair. And I thought once people got that, even though I'd called it despair work, but once they thought, oh, she really means it, they'd walk out.
But, she told me, not a single person ever walked out. In the early days, she was so nervous about this that Joanna had to remind herself again and again that people care deeply.
I would look at them going in and taking their seats, and I would say, each one is a bodhisattva. Each one is in pain for their world, and their pain tells them how deeply they belong and how much they love this world.
And eventually, over decades of teaching, what developed in her was a deep trust in people. Time and again, she's found that as we speak the truth to each other,
I find that we love each other. That's dependable. You share your vulnerability. You dare to speak what's really on your heart. And that's such an act of trust. And trust is so close to feeling that it's sort of hard not to fall in love with each other. You know what I'm talking about, I bet.
Mm-hmm. In this podcast, you've heard us talk a lot about how valuable it can be to allow ourselves to really feel our depth of feeling about what it is to be alive in this time. But building the capacity to stay with these feelings takes practice and supportive relationships. Remember that the work that reconnects is group work. We don't dive into the dark places alone. In spiritual traditions around the world and throughout time, there are 1,000 ways for us to honor our pain together. With ritual and in community, or even with a single trusted friend who's up for it. We can't wish the pain away, but we can take good care of ourselves and each other by moving slow, checking in with ourselves, asking for help, and staying connected with our communities. Years ago, I was on the phone with Joanna while I was going through one of the hardest times of my life, and she said something to me I'll never forget. She said, "Let your suffering connect you to the suffering of your world. Can you see how your heartbreak connects you to a mother in Yemen who's just lost her child to hunger? Or to a farmer in India who lost their crops to flooding? Or someone who's just received a cancer diagnosis?" She wasn't equating these painful experiences. Every loss is not exactly the same. But she was saying, we are all connected in that our hearts break. Our pain becomes sacred when we allow it to deepen our connection with our world, as Joanna advised me to do. We also do this when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and witnessed in our pain by another person, and when we reach out beyond ourselves to be generous with someone else in pain. This is how honoring our pain can deepen our trust in one another and in the world. We've reached the end of our journey through the Truth Mandala, but the journey never really ends. This stuff is messy. Just like that flowing stream that Joanna talked about, our pain for the world comes and goes, and it comes back again. And every time we give ourselves the space to honor it, it can give us the gift of deepening our passion for justice, our longing for truth, and connection to our world. Our tears have a way of washing us clean, cleansing our outlook, and showing us new possibilities for how we can live in these impossible times. In our next episode, we're going to talk about something that most of us long for these days, and that can be quite complicated to find: hope.
It's built on a sense that there's room for change, that there's a space, as small as it is, there's actually a possibility for a positive change. So it's not up to you to know when things are gotten so locked into doom that there's no hope. Our despair is not that powerful that it can dictate whether life will continue.
Thanks for listening to We Are the Great Turning. This show is free for everyone, made possible by our generous donors. If you'd like to, you can make a donation at wearethegreatturning.com. There, you can also find our toolkit with discussion prompts, guided exercises, and more to bring the insights from this podcast deeper into your life. We build the Great Turning by talking and acting together. So please consider sharing these episodes with someone you love, or forming a podcast club and going through the exercises in the toolkit together. This episode, we have a bonus for you. It's a guided exercise designed to help you practice the work that reconnects with the people in your life. You can find the link to that bonus episode in your podcast app. We'd love your feedback, so send us a note or a voice message at greatturning@soundstrue.com. You can find me on Instagram at Jess_Serrante, SERRANTE, and at JessSerrante.com. This show is brought to you by the Sounds True Foundation. Thank you to our team at Sounds True, especially Tammy Simon and Fernie Tiflis. Our show's producer is Anya Kamenetz. Our audio producer and engineer is Luce Fleming. Our editorial consultant is Anna Sale. Thank you to Rising Appalachia for the use of their songs Resilient, Catalyst, and Novels of Acquaintance. Thank you to all of our generous donors who made this podcast possible: Christopher Hormel, the Best Family Foundation, the Calliopeia Foundation, Barbara Ford, Polly Howells, Linnea Lombard, Kathleen Sullivan, Blaise Dupuis, Miju Han, Gideon Wald, and everyone who contributed to our GoFundMe. Special thanks to Anne Simons Bucher, Peggy Macy, Stephanie Kaza, Jeremy Blanchard, Lucy Boucher, Jesse Marshall, Lindley Meese, and Jonathan Davis. I want to offer my deepest gratitude to Joanna Macy for her profound friendship and extraordinary generosity and wisdom. It has been the honor of my life to make this podcast with you. Wow.
Wow. Good for us.
Good for us. Thank you, Joanna.
Thank you.
You
were just right there, refusing to step aside. Beautiful.